How's it going, everyone? Today is we have an incredible guest here today. We have Jay Dobyns, who is a former retired ATF agent for 27 years, the author of two incredible books, football coach, speaker, just an incredible story. And Jay, I am so fortunate to have you on here this morning.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Welcome to your audience. Hopefully we'll say something interesting that will entertain them.
Well, if anyone reads these books, I don't think you'll have to say much because these books and your story read like one of those movies you watch in Hollywood where you're kind of like, oh, this is Sons of Anarchy, but you really lived it. And for you to put yourself out there like this, it must have been cathartic, but in a sense, was it a burden off your shoulders putting the first book out?
Well, I think in writing those books, and like I'm not a professional writer by any means, but I did know that there was a few simple things that I wanted to accomplish. I wanted to be transparent. My stories are not hero stories. There's elements of achievement in them. There's elements of success, but there's also a lot of elements of failure and mistakes. And I didn't want to hide those. I didn't want to try to gloss who I am or what my career was, because I think that's counterfeit. That's, what, I wanted to just be true. People can read the books and then they can decide how they feel about me, plus or minus, positive or negative. But I wanted to, when I put my name on them, I wanted them to be authentic. So,
which is the irony of that is that your part of your job was infiltrating the Hells Angels and other organizations, the undercover work, where you have to create this false type of person's lifestyle, yet deep down, you're doing it for the right reasons. And for you, it's just awesome stuff, Jay.
Well, I think that's one of the challenges for anybody who works in covert operations, whether there be, in the law enforcement side, on the military side, is that it's a struggle. It's difficult, and it's emotionally and spiritually and intellectually, all those things challenging to pretend to be someone you're not, and then have to convince people who are, violent and not welcoming to anybody to sell them that you're someone, sell them on a false persona, sell them that you're someone that you're not, and then to do it over time.
I was glad in your books you keep a glossary of different keywords and stuff, because I'm familiar with certain motorcycle people, different bikes and stuff, but the glossary really helped. And so I guess one of my questions was, obviously names you really put out there that, hey, these people are real people, so and so. But was there ever any issue on your end in terms of, once you retire from the ATF, certain aspects of the case you can or cannot write about? Because there's nothing really redacted in these books.
No, you know what? I actually got in trouble with the government for the No Angel book, because they didn't want me telling the story. They didn't want me telling it without their permission or approval. But there's nothing hidden in there. There's no secrets to it. There's, like, I told the story as best I could tell it, as authentically and truthfully as I could tell it. I referred to recordings and reports and all those things. I didn't hide anything, but there was nothing to be hidden. There was no, I didn't reveal any specific tradecraft, any nuanced, small, micro details that someone who's reading it from the opposing side is going to say, oh, that's how they do this. It's not rocket science, man. We weren't trying to land on Mars or operate on somebody's brain. This is just cop work. It's cop land.
So I'll kind of back it up a little bit. Right now, you started your career, not career, but you as a football player, as a star football player, and now here you are as a football coach. Is that full circle for you? Could you imagine when you were an athlete back in the day to now as a coach, that these 27, 30 years in between there would lead you to where you are today as a coach?
I think that all the elements and events and aspects of my life have brought me to this place, to this time, with this team, with this group of kids to coach them. And I think, like, I'm not a great football coach. I'm not an amazing football coach by any means. But what I do is I try to take all these life's events, and more importantly, the mistakes and the failures that I experienced, and translate those through football to my kids to, like for our football program, I always say, I don't run a football program. I run a leadership program whose lessons are taught through football. So I take all these things that I did wrong and try to instill them in these young men so that they don't have to make the same mistakes and go through the same heartache that I did.
Have you found it's difficult during COVID with social distancing and stuff how has that affected your job besides the actual physical part of it?
Well, it's super difficult, obviously, for everybody. But when you're trying to run a football team with a bunch of kids, basically, and you have all these COVID protocols, like when our season began and before we started to figure out how to play football games, our football practices looked like a massive CrossFit class. They didn't even look like a football practice, because we're just trying to figure out the mechanics of how all this works.
Right. Very, very fascinating. I can imagine kids, like, they want to get out there and hit each other, have fun on the field and stuff, but the mental aspect of it, just for you as an adult though, but for these kids, it's got to be daunting for them to have a leader up there that's willing to put the time to, like, kind of work with them through this all.
Well, I think that's, one of the aspects we talked about is leadership. Is like, okay, look, we've got this virus out there. We have to take it serious. We have to adhere to all these protocols to protect ourselves, to keep ourselves safe. But, like, are we going to spend our entire life in fear of this? Are we going to be afraid of it? Are we going to, like, go find a corner to hide in? Are we going to fight back? Are we going to do something about it? Are we going to be proactive in overcoming this? Or are we just going to sit there and wait for everybody to tell us how to act, what to do, what to think, how to respond? Like, get out in front of it. Be aggressive. Stand up to it. It's all these things in life that we encounter. Man, that's still football. Standing up to the adversary. Do something about it. Man, fight back. Be resilient. Overcome.
Right. No, it's great to hear that. Now, if you have your kids or some of these athletes, or say you get brought to a school to give a motivational speech, and one of these kids comes up to you, or your own kid is like, man, coach, I really want to do this ATF life. I really love law enforcement. Are you, obviously they could read your book and they probably know who you are based on their parents and stuff, but is there a fear on your part where it's like you don't want them to fall into your same pratfalls or issues you had, or is there a fear where you're kind of like, man, follow your heart, but make sure you make the right choice here?
Yeah, absolutely. But there's elements to my career, especially the end of my career, that didn't work out the way I'd wanted to, the way I'd hoped that they would. I had some struggles at the end of my career. But even with all those hardships, I would recommend anybody to get into law enforcement or to get into ATF. I would not change one thing. Even the hard times, even the bad things, even the mistakes, I wouldn't change any of that. The upside and the things I gained and the experiences I had and the people that I was privileged to work with and work alongside were well worth any problems I might have had. I would never trade the problems off in exchange for not having all those other great things and amazing experiences I had.
Right. The idea right now, after the George Floyd incident, there became this movement for Defund the Police. Now, if you were still in law enforcement at the time, how are you dealing with that mentally yourself?
Well, it's never been ever in our history harder to be a lawman or a lawwoman than it is today.
Right.
It's never been harder, never been more difficult. And just in general, like in society, culture, I truly think that God is weeping when he sees how we treat each other.
Right.
How we treat each other as human beings, when he sees how our law enforcement community is viewed and treated and looked at, when 99.9% of the people that put on a badge and put a gun on their hip are truly out there to try to help people and protect people and keep people safe. And the fact that they've been demonized for the profession they chose, which is a moral, ethical, high integrity profession, it's heartbreaking, because I know and have worked with thousands and thousands of lawmen, and they just want to take care of people. And like any element of society, are there some that skew off? Are there some bad apples? Absolutely. No one dislikes or disapproves of bad policing more than good policemen.
Right. Yeah, it's been tough. I used to be former Secret Service, and but my friends, a couple of my friends are counter snipers out there now, with a couple of on the current president's detail, and we laugh about stuff like, oh, I remember training back then. It's like, but then they should tell me what's going on now. It's like, man, we were never trained for that. Like, how to deal with this built-in manufactured hatred towards someone that wears the badge. And it's like you said it, but like, it's very disheartening that, man, I love what I did, but would I want to do that now during the current climate? And I honestly don't know. It's man, that makes me sad.
Well, when you see lawmen out there trying to hold the line, trying to protect the public, trying to protect property, who are getting spit on, getting things thrown at them, bricks, rocks, frozen water bottles, people screaming in their face, I don't have any word for it. I think that the demonization of law enforcement is wrong. It's unfair. But I have even more admiration for those that keep doing it in spite of all those things. There's men and women all over the country who their alarm clock goes off in the morning, and they put their feet on the ground, and they get up and they pour a bowl of Cheerios and have some coffee and pat their kids on the head and kiss their wife goodbye, not knowing whether they're ever going to come home, whether they're going to have the chance to come home. And they know they're going to be hated and despised every day they put that badge on, every day they put that uniform on. They're going to be second guessed and critiqued. And in most situations, in many situations, regardless of what they do, they're not going to be allowed to get it right. And they still go. They still go to work. They still do their best in spite of all those things.
Right. One of the things, obviously, in law enforcement, as you would know, is the importance of teamwork. But as you transition to the undercover aspect of it through the ATF, that becomes more reliant on kind of your street savvy skills and the team you can kind of work with. How difficult is it to not be able to utilize that full team, whether it's the patrol guy, the person back at the office? Like, when you're living on this job, this undercover work, it's on you. And that must be scary once you first kind of get into that.
Well, there's a lot of aspects to undercover work. It's undercover work, and undercover operations are really nothing more than a tool in the investigator's toolbox.
Right.
There's so many different techniques and aspects to investigate a case. Undercover work is one of those. Undercover operators are typically viewed as the black sheep because they don't fit the norm. They don't look like the other cops. They don't act like the other cops. Their assignments are different than the other cops. But it's nothing more than an aspect that is used to investigate a case. The issue with it, and where it causes especially concern for executives and management, is that unlike a wiretap, unlike surveillance, unlike historical cases, you're taking a living, breathing asset and inserting them as close to the enemy as you can. And there's a lack of control at times with that. Undercover is very fluid. It's really hard to always plan it and set up operational plans. Things very rarely go exactly as we intended them to. And so that makes people uncomfortable, especially people who are in supervision, who want to control everything, who want to have everything fit inside its box. And then when you're putting a living, breathing person that's on your team that you care about, and you're inserting them into harm's way, man, it's not for everybody. That's for sure. It's not for everybody on both sides. It's not for everybody to be an operator. It's not for everybody to supervise those operations.
Right. At the onset of Black Biscuit, it already chaos with the Hells Angels and the Mongols. Now, when you get inserted into that, it's a time of war or whatever you want to describe that as, you're jumping into something where these are two groups that really hate each other. And was there, it's just the whole, I mean, it's very fascinating, this whole, how you got into this, but the creation of when you shoot that undercover, the cop that dresses the Mongol in the ditch, the picture of the book is it's powerful because I'm thinking this is actually already, this has really happened in the sense that this does happen. People get killed, shot, and stuff like that. But for you to create this kind of backstory, I would be like, man, what if they find out I'm full of shit? Like, how long did it take for you to concoct kind of getting you infiltrated that deep, that quick?
Well, like with aspects to us bluffing the murder of the Mongol,
right?
That actual event, that operation within the operation, it was built over a lifetime. It was built over a career. It wasn't something that we invented and on a Monday said, hey, let's go pretend like we killed somebody and we'll sell it to them on Friday. When I got into that Hells Angels assignment, I already had 15 years of undercover experience behind me. And I had bought everything on the street from Saturday night specials to shoulder launched missiles. I had bought everything from dime bags in the park to cartel level cocaine loads, from PVC homemade pipe bombs that some tweaker was making in his garage or in his mom's basement, up to servo activated remote controlled C4 devices. I had done home invasions and murder for hires. And so, over the course of my career, I had 500 plus undercover operations under my belt. So when we bluffed this murder, it was a culmination of all these experiences and trying to make it real and trying to make it believable and then trying to figure out like all the questions in advance, get out in front of all, like, what are we going to be asked? How are we going to explain it? What's the backstory? So all of that went into that operation in order to bluff a murder, convince murderers that we had actually killed someone on their behalf, and then let it have the legs that when they started researching it and questioning it and their intellect and their paranoia, not wanting to believe it, still being able to overcome all those things and make it real in their eyes.
Incredible. And I'm not sure if you can answer this or if I'm going to frame the question right, but you're undercover ATF. What are the chances that you don't know or your agency doesn't know that, hey, the DEA is going after the same group, another, not Black Biscuit, but another version of this, or FBI has a guy in, or whoever? And what is it? I mean, obviously there's issues involved, but does ego come into play there if you guys are all trying? I mean, obviously I would think that for the greater good of the cause, you guys want to take care of the problem, get the guns off the street, the drugs. I get it. But at what point does your ego, not yours, but the agency ego, get in the way of getting rid of this, helping the situation?
Well, in street operations, we do our best to deconflict opposing operations or interagency operations because of our jurisdictions. A single target may have different agencies that are looking at that person. So how do we deconflict those? That's the key to everything. The key to everything we do, not just in law enforcement, just not in operations, but in life, is communication. Like, how well and how openly do you communicate? It's how we solve problems. So, like there's an example that, like from the Hells Angels case that I think was an excellent example of that. There was a point in time where there were some members of the Hells Angels that had decided they wanted to kill me and my undercover partners. I wasn't aware of that plan, but DEA had an informant into the Hells Angels who was unaware that we were undercover operators. They were two independent cases going on. Well, that informant reports to his DEA handler, hey, some guys just left here and they're going to kill these cats down in South Phoenix. I thought you should know. Well, that DEA case agent contacts the ATF case agent. The ATF case agent contacts me and says, man, you got to get out of your house. There's a hit squad coming for you dudes. So that is an element of deconfliction where communication literally saved lives that day.
Right. Very fascinating. One of the things, the themes I got in your books is that not all good people are good, not all bad people are bad. And it kind of hit me because it's like, I'm familiar with the Hells Angels, Sonny, guys like this, Chuck Zito, people that are out there just because you know who they are. But you hear some of the people, it's like, I don't know if I sympathize with the Hells Angels, people like that, but like I know what the people say, the stories, the cases, like these on paper, like a lot of these people are bad guys, killers. I get it, but and then on the same side, you look at some law enforcement people, especially what you went through with the framing, the arson, like craziness like that, where like the blurred line between good and bad, you have to operate in that area, and not a lot of people could do that. And so, I don't know if you could kind of touch upon that, but I love how you bring that up.
Well, I'll just I'll insert myself in it, and I'll put myself in the center of that question. I'm not as good or as bad as people think. And I think that applies across the board. I met plenty of really violent people who committed some despicable crimes, did some terrible things, who I saw elements of their life in an undercover role that I liked them. I enjoyed being around them. So it goes both ways, and we're not always consistently who people think we are. And the same thing goes for cops. The same thing goes for me. Like, I did some good things, but man, I've done bad things too. Like, I've made mistakes in my life. I say this all the time, publicly and privately. I have made a million mistakes and done a million things wrong in my life. Now, fortunate for me, God and my family have given me 1,000,001 second chances to try to fix it, to try to recover from it. And that's the blessing. That's, for me, is that all these things I've done wrong and all these mistakes I've made, the people in my life and God have always given me a second chance, 1,000,000 times over, to try to fix them.
One of the interesting things is that I've met Chuck Zito a bunch of times, never had an issue with him. I've seen him out there with clients doing his thing. But people like Chuck Zito, and I can't think of the guy from the Mafia that used to be an enforcer that got out. Now, when you leave organizations like the Mafia or Hells Angels, or whatever group like that, is there how do you just be like, I did all this, now I'm getting out? Like, how do you, and I'm not sure you can really talk about it, but like, how do you get out of that lifestyle and just start doing Hollywood or go on interviews and doing it? Now you're working a normal business 9 to 5. Now, how does that work?
I don't think you ever fully escape that lifestyle.
Okay.
I think you might change your path, change your direction, change your affiliation a little bit. But if you've spent 20, 30 years as a part of a criminal organization, and then one day you wake up and call time out and say, I'm not going to do this anymore, do you really change? Does your mentality really change? And let's flip the switch on that. I think it goes both ways. If you spend 20 or 30 years as a cop and then you retire, do you all of a sudden stop being a cop? Do you all of a sudden stop thinking like a cop, stop acting like a cop? You don't.
Right. It's for you, because you obviously were a cop, are a cop, but you were living that lifestyle, so you had to literally keep that switch right in the middle the whole time. I could imagine coming on or off any second. You have to operate at such a high level. It's just awesome.
Well, I'll give you a story which I think is a good reflection of that. During the Hells Angels case, I was gone for an extended period of time from home. I came home, and my wife told me, "You cannot walk in this door after being gone for months at a time and act like the alpha dog at this house and treat me and our kids like we're street people. Like, that's not going to fly." And then my self-defense of that was, man, I'm not a light switch. I can't turn this on and off. I have to be on, because people that treat what I do for a living, people that treat it as a hobby, they end up dead. I have to be on all the time. And then her response back to me was, well, if you're a light switch, you better install a dimmer when you come to this house. And if you can't tone down that attitude around me and the kids, don't come back.
Wow. And so it brings up a fascinating part of your life where, as you're undercover, you still have to maintain that family life, in the sense of you do have a family back in your real life. And when you're working undercover, does that must weigh on you, because your actions as undercover, no matter what, could come back and affect your family life. So how do you, like, for you, it's, again, for you to be locked into the undercover world while maintaining your real life, it's got to be, it has to weigh on you every day when you're undercover.
Well, absolutely. And that question, I mean, you're spot on with that question. Ultimately, I mean, it did real time affect my family, and then it did after the fact affected my family. One of my regrets, probably my biggest regret, probably my biggest shame over the course of my career was I complain about being abandoned and betrayed at the end of my career by my agency.
Right.
During the course of my career, I abandoned and betrayed my own family. I put my job and what I was doing in front of my wife, in front of my kids, and I had justified it to myself. And I pushed them aside. And I realized after the fact, like now looking back on how I acted and the things I did from a 30,000-foot view with a clearer mind, I realized the people that loved me the most, the people that supported me the most, the people that were the most loyal to me are the ones that I treated the worst. And I carry that with me. I'm ashamed of that. I regret that. I spend every day now trying to fix that and make up for that. But there's no denying that, like, I'm upset that ATF, abandoned and betrayed me. I abandoned and betrayed my own family. It comes back around, man. That was whatever you believe in. If you believe in karma, that was karma.
Right. It's a vicious circle that you unfortunately seems like you're at both ends of it. And just fascinating. And that whole arson situation where it's like you get out and whatever, they start kind of, I'm not sure the reasoning why they would kind of declassify information on your part, addresses and stuff like that. But when they do that, and you said earlier, like, you're never out of it. And so when these people start realizing who you really are, do you kind of like, what is that the first time you question like your agency going, what are you doing? Like, this is just because I'm out of this aspect of this case, this stuff is still going on and I'm still part of that world in these people's eyes.
It was heartbreaking for me on a personal level, because I had given my life, my blood, sweat, and tears to the agency, trying to handle the agency's business, as best I could. And I had done that my entire adult life. So when the Hells Angels case ends and then my true identity is exposed, like, man, the death threats started flooding in. The Hells Angels had issued a contract on me. The Aryan Brotherhood had picked up the contract. The MS-13 had picked up the contract. There were threats to kidnap and torture my kids. There were threats to videotape the kidnapping and torture of my wife. In the summer of 2008, my house was burned to the ground. And my agency didn't care. They didn't react. And I think that they were frozen as much as they just didn't know what to do. I had executives at ATF saying, dude, we don't know what to do. We don't know how to start the stop of this. You're on your own, dude. They told me to my face, you're on your own.
Jeez. It's just crazy that it would come to that, especially after your years of service. Events, and again, another thing part of your book, like you're in the middle of the law enforcement, events like the Rodney King incidents or Columbine or Oklahoma City bombing, these events that everyone knows someone that was, or just was part of this, of the media, taking all this information in real time. At what point did you become numb to incidents like this, and how did it change your psyche moving forward?
Well, I'll tell you, you mentioned, I responded to the LA riots after the Rodney King decision. I worked some cases that were interrelated to the 9/11 terrorist bombings. I reacted post-event to the Branch Davidian ATF Waco events, where we had several agents murdered and dozens of other chewed up. But the one that really got me was reacting to the Columbine high school shooting, which was not the first high school shooting, the first school shooting that we'd experienced, but the first massive one, like on that scale. There's been more, there's been others. But like walking through that cafeteria and walking through that library and seeing the bodies of these kids, like with blood pools around them, and knowing that those kids showed up to school that day to do all the things that kids do when they go to high school. Right. They were just going to go to class, hang out with their friends. After school, they were going to go to their clubs or their sports teams practice, all those things. And being trapped inside that school, they were literally sheeps trapped in that school by wolves that were armed with assault weapons and pistols and bombs. And when I look back at that event, the thing that's really burned into my brain is that there were backpacks, like book bags, scattered everywhere. Like these kids were shucking off their books just in a panic to try to escape their own school.
Right.
That event, and seeing and smelling and all the things that come with investigating a case like that, literally my DNA changed at that point. And I started becoming an angry investigator. I wasn't just showing up to work to do my job and investigate a case. I was investigating cases with a chip on my shoulder, because that was it. My DNA changed that day.
Now, as a football coach, I imagine every day you go to, these could have been your kids, you coach and stuff. And so you must still kind of have those kind of, not flashbacks, but is there like a PTSD about where it's like, hey, like if I'm a coach here, like what could I do to help these kids if this happens again? Or does that ever run through your mind?
Well, I'll tell you what my professional experience is, like how they might translate now into coaching high school football that maybe other coaches, other very good coaches maybe don't consider, is from my first day coaching. I've been coaching for a long time. I've been coaching for 15 years. But from the very first day, one of my considerations is, what do I do and how will I react if some adversary approaches my team, comes on my campus? I've thought about what I'm going to do in that situation. How many coaches consider that? How many teachers consider that? On the other side, how many should? how many of them have had the experiences I have? So like I have the, if nothing else, the advantage of having experienced those things to try to think through, if that situation, if someone confronts my team, if someone comes on my campus with bad intentions, what am I going to do? How am I going to react to it?
Right. Recently, Dave Chappelle put on a comedy special, and he talked about how his son has to go to school and take training where it's like, hey, if there's a bomb threat, this is, you do this excuse, or if there's a shooting, you do this. And yes, there were some humorous parts to it, but the underlying issue is that we live in a world now where this is necessary. The bad guys are going to keep being bad guys. And so for you to have that forward thinking that, hey, yes, I get it. I agree with you. I don't think I'm so bad we have to do this training, but if it does happen, let's be ahead of the game. If you to do that, that says a lot.
Well, I think it's unfortunately the world that we live in.
Right.
And putting your head in the sand or being naive enough to think, well, that's never going to happen to me. That's never going to happen at my school. That's never going to happen to my kids. There are hundreds and hundreds of families who have kids impacted by these events who thought it was never going to happen to them. It was never going to happen to their kids. And then when it's happening, now it's too late. It's too late to think about what you're going to do about it. You have to think about those things in advance. You have to have planned for them.
Right. Now, I want to step back. Your first week on the job, you get shot. For all intents and purposes, you could have died. You should have died. Could have died. And the thing that really made me kind of, I mean, obviously I respect you. But the bit where they're like, hey, you want to turn down your retirement. And right there, it's like, this is a man that anyone else would be like, I'll take retirement. Fuck, I serve. Like, I'm out. But for you to recover, have that cool, unique experience with that doctor, and then live the life you do undercover with the ATF and everything, it's a testament to your will to survive. Now, is that something you've always had, or is this because you wanted to make a difference and that kind of was your fire to survive, recover, and continue doing what you love?
Well, I'll tell you, there's probably a couple answers to that. I grew up in a blue collar family.
Right.
My dad was a carpenter. My dad pounded nails his entire life until he couldn't pound nails anymore. My mom was a house cleaner. My mom scrubbed people's toilets for a living that didn't want to scrub their own toilet. I had been raised in a work first, play second mentality. Handle your business before you engage in the pleasure side of life. So when I got shot, I got hired on a Monday. I raised my hand and got sworn in on a Monday. 4 days later on a Thursday, I had a bullet that went through my chest. It went in my back. It passed through my lung. It narrowly missed my heart. It exited my chest. And I was laying in the dirt and grime and dog shit of a trailer park, bleeding to death. There was a huge pool of blood growing around me. Like blood was squirting out of my chest like you're holding your thumb over the end of a garden hose. 4 days on the job, and I tell people all the time, after 4 days, I hadn't even gotten a paycheck yet. Freebie, right? I wasn't going to get paid for another 2 weeks. So, I get to the hospital and survive that. I'm at the hospital and all the liability attorneys are lining up. They all want my case. And they were telling me, hey kid, you know what $1 million looks like? How about $5 million? Like, I can get you that. You were not yet trained for this. You were not yet prepared for this. You were put in a situation that the government has created a huge liability for themselves. They want you and your story to just go away. They want to write a check and pretend like this never happened. Tell me how many zeros you want on that check and I'll go get it for you. And this is generational type money. We can get you money that you'll never have to work another day in your life. Neither will your family or your kids or their kids if you handle this correctly. And all I could think of was to get out. Like, no cop, no one ever takes a badge and a gun under the premise that they're someday or somehow going to get rich.
Right.
None of them do. They take them for all these other reasons, you know, to serve and protect. And like, really, for me, all I wanted to do was to heal, get healthy, come back to work, and try again and see if I could do it right.
Just incredible. Yeah, that survival. It really puts in perspective, and it kind of, for you to go through that, and then 27 years later, I now I can retire. It's like the will to live. It's just awesome, Jay.
You know, John, I'll tell you what, I have no regrets over that decision either. I had ups and downs. I had high points in my career. I had low points in my career. I look back on, okay, now at this point, like 33 years ago is when I was shot. How would my life have been different 33 years ago had I taken that buyout, had I taken that money? And I don't even want to think about it because I am so happy with my life, in spite of my mistakes, in spite of the hardships. I'm so happy with just the way everything has turned out. I would not change one thing, even the bad stuff, even getting shot. If I had to do it all over again, I would still get shot. It was one of the best things that happened to me from all the things that happened after that.
Yeah, it's like that butterfly effect where if you change one thing, but think of the countless lives you did save undercover that, sure, it was a detriment to your family back home, but think of the families you kept together or you made better because of your actions. And again, it's a very, you lived a very fascinating life. And you probably just getting started.
If I would have taken that buyout, my personal life probably would have been much more comfortable. But in exchange for what? Like what did you change? What did you do? How did you improve anything? How did you make things better for anybody else? I wouldn't have had those opportunities.
Recently, I rewatched Den of Thieves, and the reason why I reached out to you is because I was watching the movie, and I'm like I'm familiar with the actors, Gerard. Like I know these guys have to do the proper tactical gun training for their roles, but there's a dialogue, there was a grittiness to that movie where I'm kind of like, there's got to be someone here that was probably a dark cop or someone that did this type of work on the set. And I start digging through, I see your name, and I go down your rabbit hole, and here we are. So now, is that something where you're kind of, could that be fun for you where you become a film consultant? Or I imagine for you to kind of make sure, like, hey, this is filmed correctly, or that's not how undercover operation will work, or like, what is the fascination with, I guess, a two-part question, shows like Sons of Anarchy, how does that help or hinder kind of like the undercover world? And for someone like you, when you go on movie sets, is that cathartic for you? Fun? Do you have flashbacks? Like, how does it work for you?
Let me ask you something real quick before I answer that. Is this like live, or do you edit this?
I edit this, and it goes live in February.
Let me step off for just a second, and I'll answer that question.
Yes.
Just hold tight for just a second.
Yep. If you guys haven't yet, definitely pick up this book. This is the sequel, prequel, Catching Hell. And his first book, No Angel. Just incredible, really great reads. And like he said it best, like the content you get from here, and it's easy to read, it's great, it's raw, it's authentic. There's some pictures in there that kind of help paint the picture more. So, but yeah, this is just a incredible book. So I highly suggest you guys read them. Yeah, it's incredible stuff.
My apologies. I had to step off for just a second, but I know what your question was. So if you just want me to pick up from that question, I will.
For sure.
So I was asked to consult on the Den of Thieves film on the law enforcement side, and to help train those actors into the actors are great mimics. That's what they do. That's what makes them who they are. And they can look at someone and hear someone and watch someone and then repeat that very authentically. So for Den of Thieves, I mean, I literally spent years with Jerry Butler, like preparing him for that role. That his role as Big Nick in Den of Thieves was at least loosely based on me and my personality to some extent. So that's probably not a very flattering statement, because if you've watched Den of Thieves, like Big Nick is not a very likable guy.
Right.
He's over the edge. He's pushed outside the edges of the envelope. But in that process, like I took all these experiences that I had and then tried to translate them to that acting team. And my goal was, and I told them this, like every day we met, every day we worked together, I want cops who watch this film to say, man, those guys got it right. That is how we talk. That is how we act. I wanted an authentic translation of our world. We've all, regardless of what it is, I don't care if you're a doctor or a lawyer or a school teacher, if you're a cop, if you're in the military, we all watch movies and we see when they get it wrong. And we're like, man, not like that. It would never happen. But like, we don't say that. We don't talk like that. We don't do that. My job was to try to filter through some of that and just make it as real as I could. And I thought those actors in Den of Thieves, I thought they were spot on. I thought they did an amazing job of taking our world, the real world, and distilling it down and giving performances that were captured on film that were true to life.
Yeah, everything they said, even when it came to the gearing up, doing like the dry firing drills or their lingo or how they were together in public. And then that dinner scene with Gerard Butler's character, Big Nick, where he's got that bravado and arrogance and whatever outside the papers. But the minute he's crying in the car after seeing his daughter, like you kind of see that, man, this is real cop stuff here. They have this, it's just very, like, it's just great. I'm so fortunate, like, to watch that movie and now talk to you and be like, that would make sense, because I think a little bit of all these characters are part of your life, and that's a cool thing to be part of.
You know, like my fingerprints on that film are not the story itself. You know, the story is of these
right
ex-military guys turned criminal that are planning to rob the Federal Reserve Bank. My fingerprints on that are the performances of the cop characters in their everyday life and in their investigations, like trying to keep them authentic, trying to help them understand like who we really are and how we really speak to each other and how we really act. And so if people saw that film and said, man, I'm not sure I like these dudes, but that was believable, that's probably the greatest compliment that I can receive, because not everybody likes me either. And I tried to convey that to Jerry Butler and to the guys that played those cop characters, that it's not a hero story. Like at times the world and the public wants to treat us and make us appear heroic. The reality of it is we're human beings. And all those aspects of our life come into play when we go to work. And like, we don't always get it right. But it's the mentality of at least trying to and pushing the envelope and being as aggressive as we can within the law and within policy, and being flamboyant at times. That's real life.
Right. And the fact that they're all flawed characters, and I know we talked about earlier, but when you talk about not all good guys are good and all bad guys are bad, you kind of sympathize with these characters. And I think that's where that realness comes in, because you can see the good and bad of all these characters, and half of them are murderers. And that's a testament to work like yourself, where you can really put in the authentic part of what you guys do. So us as viewers can, it's a Hollywood movie, we can have fun, we can laugh, we can cry, whatever, but there's an underlying thing that you're able to kind of put your stamp on. That's badass.
Well, and I think it's also a testament to the writer-director, Christian Gutegas, who was like open to my thoughts and my suggestions as he was writing his script and as he was directing his film. In that the good guys, you see aspects to them that aren't all that good.
Right.
The bad guys, you see aspects to those characters that aren't all that bad.
Right.
And that's real life. That's real.
Right. Yeah, especially when they're messing with the daughter or the daughter's boyfriend. And it's just like, these guys are legit killers, and here they are doing something a normal father, or whatever normal is, would do to have fun with their daughter's boyfriend.
I just thought that those personality aspects of characters on both sides of that equation, good guy, bad guy, were real, were true to life.
Now, not sure if you could talk about this, but has there been anyone approaching you being like, hey, who's going to play Jay in a movie? Or are you just happy kind of putting your stamp on different roles like that, where it's like, I can kind of put myself here with Big Nick or other characters like that?
Well, whoever in their career takes a badge and a gun and then thinks at some point that the events of their life and career are going to land them consulting on a film?
No one.
No one. No one. No one. Never imagined it. So I was like hugely flattered to be asked to do that. As a film consultant and with a small role in the film, I consulted with the actors the same way that I did the job. I did it the best I could every day. I went as hard as I could every day. I did everything I could to inspire the people around me to be amazing every day. So, you know, in the end, as this all shakes out, man, like who could have ever predicted that? Like, no, like, so you say, like, who's going to play Jay in the movie?
Right.
Like, the No Angel book has been, you know, in Hollywood and being looked at for a film production for 15, 16, 17 years.
Right.
Trying to get a movie made and having a movie made are, man, the mechanics of that and the timing and the luck and all those things, like, really difficult to do. Whether it ever gets made or doesn't get made, man, just to be in a point where you did something professionally in your career that Hollywood's thinking about, like, how can we translate this into a film? I never expected that.
Right.
Every that takes a step forward is a frosting on the cake. It's a bonus that I never could have predicted or expected or anticipated.
Now, do you get weird when someone's like, man, Jay, you're my hero? Like, for me, I remember reading all the stories with Wyatt Earp and lawmen like Elliot Ness and guys like that. So obviously you read stories and you see what happened and you watch the movies. But for reading your book, I'm like, man, this is someone that grew up during my lifetime, or obviously you're a little bit older, but like, you could be the Wyatt Earp for my generation, where this is a real lawman that did some crazy, insane stuff. Yeah, he might be flawed, but this is a guy that loved his job. So is it weird for you when people like, man, Jay, you were my inspiration, you're my hero? Because again, the first day you sign the papers and raise your hand, do your pledge, you're not expecting that. So it must be kind of, is it off-putting at first when you hear that?
It's flattering. I mean, we all of us, just as human beings, like to hear kind words about ourselves.
Right.
My typical reaction is, if I'm your hero, raise your standards, because you can do better. You can do better than me.
Right.
It's typically my reaction, my response. You know, I'll tell you a little story, and I think it's a very human story that relates to that. Over the course of my career, my son, when I would come home from operations or when I'd be leaving for operations, my son would go out in the yard and pick up a stone and grab a little rock and give me a rock. And for years and years, I'd always felt like he had been giving me these good luck charms, like these little trinkets of good luck. I kept every one of those stones. I kept one in my pocket at all times. I had them in my undercover car, the saddlebags of my motorcycles, in my undercover houses. I was handing those stones out to members of my task force saying, we are in the midst of all this turmoil and all this violence and all this treachery. And here we are, we're thriving and surviving. There's some kind of blessing on these stones that Jack has given me. So please keep one with you. So right before we're ready to start the operation where we bluffed the murder, which was kind of the capstone of that investigation. I'm getting ready to leave. My son runs out in the yard and he says, Dad, don't leave yet. I got something for you. I know what he's got. He's going to get a stone, right? And he comes up and he's like, I've been saving this one for you. And he gives me this little rock and it's shaped like a heart. And so I'm a 40-plus-year-old father trying to calm an 8-year-old boy.
Right.
And we're standing in front of my house and I'm getting ready to go implement this fake murder scheme. And he gives me this rock and I looked at it and I said, Jackie, I said, all these rocks you've given me over the years, all these good luck charms, they work. They work. The reason I'm here is because of you and because of your good luck charms. They work so good, I've given them to all my partners. And this little boy standing on my driveway, no shirt, no shoes, like tears start streaming down his cheeks. And he's like, Dad, those weren't for good luck and they were only for you. You should have never given them to anyone else. And I'm standing there and my brain turned off. For years, I thought this kid had been giving me good luck charms. And he's like, that's for you to put in your pocket. And every time you think someone's going to hurt you or shoot you or stab you, I wanted you to put your hand in there and touch that. And that's like me being there to help you fight back.
Wow.
So when people say you're a hero, man, that's what I had done to my son. My job wasn't to go out and be King Kong undercover agent or super cop. My job was to raise good kids. And I had failed my kids in exchange for this job. So when people think that you're heroic or people think I'm heroic, like that is a real true life story of, if nothing else, a flawed hero, a failed hero.
Right. Are you afraid? I mean, obviously, you're in the public light when it comes to the coaching, and you go out speaking, and you write books, and you're out in Hollywood. And what are you always kind of in the back of your mind, like, oh, is this something could come up, or I could get stopped, or I could have to deal with a situation out here with my family in a restaurant?
Those situations have happened. The potential for them to continue to happen is real.
Right.
But my reaction is this. If I let the threats, if I let them scare me underground, if I hide, then they win.
Yep.
They've won. They've altered my life. They've altered my lifestyle with threats and intimidation. Like I don't want to be Osama bin Laden. I don't want to hide in a cave and wait for someone to shoot a rocket at me. I live my life. I'm not looking for a problem. I don't want a problem. If
Right.
I'm confronted, I will walk away from a problem or run away from a problem if I have to. That's not what I'm looking for. But if you corner me, or if you corner my family, like I know how to resolve the problem. It's not going to turn out good for any of us. Like, you want to confront me and not give me an escape, or you want to confront my family and not give them an escape? We're all going to the hospital. It's going to be a bad day for everybody. You know, I keep a gun on my hip and I have God's hand on my shoulder, and between the two of them, we'll figure it out.
Right. Before I let you go, is there any charity work you do or anything out there where you kind of, I know you go out there and speak to law enforcement groups and stuff like that, but are there any groups out there that you kind of are involved with in the sense where other followers and listeners can kind of support themselves?
Yeah, I'm involved in several organizations that like try to support struggling lawmen. You know, police suicide is become epidemic. So I'm involved in some organizations that try to make a positive impact on law enforcement officers that have become so overwhelmed that they're thinking and considering like really drastic traumatic solutions to escape those feelings. I think that's super important for what we do to continue to serve the lawman community. I've been involved in some charities in Africa. I've actually gone over to Africa to help rescue orphans from the situations there are pretty dire for some of these kids, these orphaned kids, and trying to like help them have a chance in life. And then through my coaching, you know, it's not a charitable organization, but it is a way for me to take all these aspects of my life and try to help improve someone else's life, and do the best I can. That's all we're really trying to do, is that if we can somehow take our experiences and use those to touch somebody else's life to make their life better, yeah, it's pretty satisfying. We can be very satisfied with what we do, and it doesn't have to have a dollar sign attached to it.
Right. Where else can someone find you? I mean, obviously your books on Amazon bookstores. Do you have social media or anywhere, like a website where people kind of reach out and share their thoughts? Or
I closed all my social media. I used to have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and it became so nasty and so hateful that I just shut it all down, because I was like, I am not allowing this outside negativity. I'm not volunteering that into my life. I don't need that in my life.
I love that.
But like to find me or to contact me is actually pretty simple. I have a website. It's just www.jdobyns.com, and it's one-stop shopping there. And there's an email there. Like you can contact me, and I respond to the emails, positive or negative. And I get plenty that say, you know, some pretty nasty things to me. I respond to those too. And I don't respond to them pissed off. I understand that there's people don't like me. I don't respond to them. I try to take the high road in all my responses.
I love that. Well, I want to thank you, Jay, for this. This was awesome. And you're a very motivating individual. And if one thing people can get from this talk is that it's okay to be flawed. Stick to your morals and as best you can, and surround yourself with good people, and we can all make a difference. And I want to thank you for this time, Jay.
Very kind. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.